Hey, welcome everybody. Can we get everyone's attention? We're going to get started here in a second. Thank you guys all for coming again. Sorry that the food ran a little bit short, but that's because we have a great turnout tonight, so that's a good problem to have. They brought out a couple more wings. There's also going to be some more butter pierogies, and there's going to be some mini tacos coming out in a little bit too. So there'll be a little bit more food plus some of the other stuff that's over there. So thank you guys all for coming, because again, with great turnouts like this, it makes it easier for us to get some great speakers to come in from Philadelphia and have Pope Leo here with us. So without further ado, we'll introduce our speakers, who is Father Jeremey and Father Joe. They're Augustinian friars in the Providence of St. Thomas of Villanova. Father Jeremey, I know in particular, is their vocations director and their director of peace and justice. They came from basically right outside of Philadelphia. It was about a 4-hour drive for them, so it's great to have them. We'll welcome them up. They're going to talk to us on friendship and St. Augustine, as well as their devotion and Pope Leo's devotion to our Mother of Good Counsel. So let's give them a round of applause.
All right, well, good evening again. So, question. 3 Augustinians, Father Joe, Father Jeremey, and Pope Leo walk into a bar. What happens?
One of you says, ow.
I don't know. We're about to find out. Well, it's great to be with you guys, and in this faith-filled room. And I thought I'd begin our discussion tonight with a story about a little boy in a religious education class, and he's given the assignment with the rest of the class to draw a picture. They weren't told what to draw. They could choose anything they want, and they could draw the picture. And so the little boy gets to work, and the teacher goes up to the little boy and says, "What are you drawing?" And he says, "I'm drawing a picture of God." Teacher thinks for a minute and says, "I don't think anybody knows what God looks like. How are you drawing a picture of God?" And he looks up and says, "Well, you're about to find out." I think, that's really the heart of Augustinian spirituality. It's a journey of learning really to draw God together. Discover who God is. And to discover who God is with other people. Much like that teacher had to learn from that little kid. We all need other people to reflect their part of the divine image to each of us. And that is certainly St. Augustine's journey himself, where he realized over the course of his life that he needed others to help him discover this God that he thirsted for, that he yearned for, and that he wanted. And so if you're ever asked a trivia question, what is Augustinian spirituality? Just use that picture of the boy drawing a picture of God and teach him the teacher a lesson. And that we all have something to reflect on. So a question for you to think about as we get started this evening. And you don't have to really answer yet. But what is a good friend? What is a good friend? What comes to mind in terms of a good quality friend? What are you looking for?
Someone that listens. Someone that listens to you when you talk.
Someone that listens, yes. Very good, yes.
Someone who calls you when you're doing something wrong.
Someone calls you when you're doing something wrong. Yeah, holds you accountable.
Correction.
Very good, yeah.
Someone who you want to call when you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, somebody you want to call. That's right. Augustine probably developed the most articulate vision of friendship. And that's what we're going to begin with tonight. And then close with our devotion to our Mother of Good Counsel. And so I thought maybe each of us are going to share our stories and how we have come to discover friendship and our Augustinian life. And so maybe I'll turn it over to Father Joe and he can introduce himself, and then I'll tell you more about my story.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. I've told a few of you I'm originally from northeastern Pennsylvania, from a town called Pottsville. Yangling Brewery is our big claim to fame. But I was so excited when I saw the pierogies because that's part of my ethnic background, Polish, Slovak. I felt very much at home as we pulled into Johnstown this afternoon. And just by way of background, did you want me to share my story? Oh, wow, okay. I'll try to keep it brief. I'm currently the pastor of St. Thomas Villanova Parish, which is the parish of Villanova University outside of Philadelphia. The parish church is on the campus, which is kind of unique, used by the parish, the university, and our Augustinian order. And now the latest thing that's happened for us is the most famous graduate of Villanova is Pope Leo, who graduated with an undergraduate degree in 1977 in mathematics. Trivia point is he's the first pope to have a degree in math. And have the opportunity to actually meet him from the time I entered the order. It'll be 28 years ago, believe it or not. And he was the head of our Midwest province at the time. And from then on have stayed in touch with him along the way. So it's been a wonderful moment for all of us to have our brother elected as Pope and to have that connection. But just very briefly, again, from upstate Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, came down to St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, studied international relations, went on to University of Virginia in that same field. My first call was to work in that field. Ultimately, I ended up in the U.S. intelligence community where I worked for 15 years. First as an analyst, then as a trainer, getting involved in counterterrorism, believe it or not. I worked at the Joint Special Operations Command in North Carolina, which we now know includes Delta and SEAL Team 6. And somehow, in the middle of all of that, I ended up at the Olympics in Atlanta in 1996 and came out of that thinking, wow, this is the ultimate of my career. I got to live and work and got paid to go to the Olympics, to meet people, to attend the events. And we did have the domestic incident. There was a bombing, but I was working the international threat. And in many ways thought, wow, can't get any better than this. And yet at the same time, in my drive back from Atlanta to DC, I thought, why do I still feel like I'm not doing what I was meant to do? And that really started to come to mind a lot more. I met an Air Force chaplain. Once a week we would have mass at my home agency, which was Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. And I went to meet with him. He said, so what do you want to talk about, Joe? And I said, I'm not entirely sure. And I started to explain, and after 3 or 4 months, he said, if I didn't know better, I think you're being called to religious life and or priesthood. So he said, you need to really think about this, get away, reflect on it. So I met an Air Force buddy out in Colorado, my favorite place. And my first time ever in the Rocky Mountains, I thought it was mountains in Pottsville, but once you saw the Rockies, I was like, no, these are really mountains. We went hiking one day, and I thought, wow, God is awesome. I got to do something about this. So I come back. It's around August 28th, the feast of St. Augustine, and I flipped the Saints a Day calendar I had at my desk that my aunt had given me. And it was a quote from St. Augustine from his Confessions. And he's looking all around at creation and saying, are you my God, the moon, the stars, the mountains? And they're all saying, no, no, no. And in one of my favorite lines, he says, my question was my gaze, and their beauty was the answer. And so the beauty of creation led him to the Creator, and I thought, that's what I just experienced. And then it hit me, I thought, oh, wait a minute, St. Augustine, there's that group called the Augustinians. So in Philadelphia, St. Joseph's, the Jesuit university where I went, and the rival was Villanova, the Augustinians. And I remembered meeting the Augustinians through my best friend from college, who had 2 Augustinians at his wedding, and then there were 2 Augustinians at another friend's wedding 10 years before. I'm now discerning, and I thought, well, they seemed like a diverse, down-to-earth, approachable group of guys. And so I called up my friend who had become director of admissions at Villanova and said, you're not going to believe this, but here's what's happening. And next day I had a phone call from our formation house in Washington, D.C. At the time, they invited me up for evening prayer dinner. I started to go ahead and meet on a regular basis. The man who's now the provincial, the head of our East Coast province, was a year ahead of me, Father Rob Hagan. And I'd say to him, well, what's it like? I said, well, you know, Joe, I can only tell you so much. You have to find out for yourself. And I just told him recently that's how he ended up getting me. I decided, well, I guess I do. I applied, was accepted, and resigned halfway to retirement, I might add, in my career, and sold my townhouse, got rid of my car, gave it to my parents, actually, and started formation. And that was a 7-year process. We studied theology and philosophy, a lot of hands-on training, and took my final vows in 2003 at Villanova. The neat connection there is the head of the order at that time was then Father Bob Krivos, now Pope Leo, who received my solemn vows along with my 2 classmates. From there, I was ordained in 2005 back in my hometown of Pottsville in my home parish, and have mainly done parish ministry over the years. But also I did a stint before Father Jeremey, I'm his predecessor, as the vocation director for 7 years, and also working in formation with our guys as they're first starting out. So that's kind of the gist of it, right? So I'll turn it back over to you, Jeremy, and see how the stories connect.
Yeah. Well, I'm an Augustine because I want to be like him. It's actually partly true. So I begin my story with I'm the only Catholic in my family. I'm a convert to the faith. And the reason I converted to the faith was because I couldn't get away from Catholics my whole life. Like growing up, my neighborhood, everybody was Catholic except me. I was the only one eating hamburgers on Friday during Lent. Considered a great privilege. I didn't have to go to Mass 3 times during the Triduum. That was a great privilege. But it always stuck with me. And then the only college I could afford to go to was a Catholic school. So you have to take Catholic theology if you go to a Catholic college. And so that's really where I started to develop a deep appreciation for the faith. And by the way, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio originally, so that's the context. Go Bengals. I'm saying Steelers country. Okay. And so I moved to D.C. I had a great interest in working for the military. And so I moved to D.C., and all my friends in D.C. were Catholic. Believe it or not, I couldn't get away from you guys. And after a few years, I started to go to Mass with them because there was a great priest with great homilies. So I started to go there to get fed. And after about 5 or 6 years of attending Mass, a friend finally said, "Don't you think it's time for RCIA?" It's now called OSA, but it's time. And so I became Catholic. And 5 years after that, I, like Father Joe, started to say, am I called to something more? Is there something more than what I'm doing? I had a great career, but I still felt like maybe there's something more. I really, really felt a love for the faith. And so I read this book about St. Augustine. Like, wow, what a cool saint. You know, he kind of had his own journey of conversion. He couldn't get away from Catholics like his mom. And that constantly that image throughout all of his journey really kind of stuck with him. And I was 33 at the time I was asking that question. He was 33 when he kind of converted. And I said, I can relate to that guy. And then, as I started talking to the Augustinians, I meet Father Joe, who was also with the government before he joined, was also in his 30s when he joined. And I said, wow, I can relate to that. And so all that leads to, I think, a very important aspect of friendship in Augustine. You know, we all have different lives, but there's similarities as well. And so what Augustine did throughout his whole life, as he was working through this notion of what it means to find God, and what it means to work and journey alongside other people, it was in hearing stories of other people that really led him into that notion that, hey, there's something we all share in common, and across our diversity, we can search for God together. And so kind of the seal of the deal for me actually came during Eucharistic adoration. I was kind of wrestling with this question, if I'm called to kind of leave my career in the safety net, or stay. And several friends and I were attending Eucharistic adoration together, and I get up to go to the confessional in the back of the church, and I noticed my 3 friends sitting next to each other, kind of gazing at the Eucharist. And I said, we're all looking in the same direction. Like, we all have 3 different states of life, but we're all looking in the same direction. And for me, that's when I knew that I was called, in some way, to enter more deeply into our faith, which would come through a calling to priesthood, but also realize that I have a call to journey with others. And so Father Joe has been, as you know, in the order a little longer than me, so he has a lot more wisdom. And so maybe I can ask you, Father Joe, in your time in order, how have you come to understand this notion of friendship in the spirit of St. Augustine?
I don't know if that's true about having more wisdom, but I certainly have been in the order a little bit longer. And I would say, in looking back on the call to the Augustinians, it's important to understand what we call our charism. The charism of the Augustinians, if we had to put one word to it, would be community. It's our living together in community as brothers on the journey together, which I was very attracted to, and then building community wherever we are in terms of our ministry, our parishes, our schools, that we're in this journey together, that we're not alone, that we support one another along the way. And again, that was very attractive. And as I went through my formation, one of the things that happened is both my parents became ill and died about 10 months apart during that time. And what I discovered is exactly what I kind of thought and hoped the order would be about, that I was so supported in my time home with my mother when she was in hospice. Then my father was in the hospital 130 days. There were 8 different Augustinians that came to visit him, and each time they would ask if he had been anointed before, and he'd wink at me like, don't tell him I've already been anointed. He was anointed 8 times along the way, and loved every minute of it. And the fact that he became part of the family. We very much, sometimes guys will say, well, we give up so much to join religious life. But Jesus says in the gospel, you really receive 100-fold. And I have found that to be so true as an Augustinian. By the way, we live together with us as our brothers, but also with the larger family. And so really the moment at the cemetery and my father's burial, we have a tradition of singing the Salve Regina. And when we all sang the Salve Regina together, it really hit me that when the rubber meets the road, these are the people that I'm going to have with me, and I'll be with them. And when you answer the question about what's a good friend, what's a true friend, that all applies for us, that when we come home at night, we have people that we can sit with, be honest and be vulnerable, and to share the ups, the downs, the good things, the bad things. And again, it's like life in general, with friendship, with family, whatever. It's not without its issues or its problems or its challenges. We're not going to paper that over, and neither did St. Augustine. But the fact that we have one another through it all, through the ups and the downs, makes all the difference. So that's kind of what I discovered. And so I'll turn it back to Father Jeremey to hear his take on that, and also a little bit about the whole transition, us both being later vocations, kind of what that was like as well.
Yeah, so, I think one of the best gifts of being bonded, committed to other people on this journey of faith is that you can't get away from each other. One of the most touching moments, I think, came a day or two after Pope Leo was elected. He went right over to our house, which is next to the Vatican, and had lunch with his brothers. He had just been made Pope, dressed in white, and he stands up and he says something. He says, I lost some things yesterday when I was elected, but being an Augustinian is not one of them. And so there's still that commitment, in a way, to that search for others. And, I think entering a religious community on fire for God, I show up thinking I know everything. And quickly my brothers remind me that I don't. And there's something incredibly powerful about that, because you realize that you do need others. And so I need people to challenge my assumptions sometimes. I need people to offer me perspectives that I haven't had. And one of the beautiful things that I found with being an Augustinian is we're all so different, as Augustine's very first community was. But yet there's something that unites us. And it's that common a commitment that we have to learn and grow together. And so transitioning from a career where I had my own house, my own car, and now I have to share those things with other people, it's the very concrete things that bring us together. It's figuring out, okay, who spilled the french fries in the car? That makes you come together. Or who left a little bit of milk in the fridge? that brings you together. And then there's something that happens beyond that. It's that unity. And so for me, it was very much learning how much I need other people. And if I could go back to my younger self before I entered religious life, I think it would be the same for all of my friends. It's, do I truly believe that I need them for something to discover God? Do I really acknowledge that I need these people? And Augustine has this beautiful understanding of friendship as, he said, you only need two things in life, health and a good friend. He valued it that much. And so I've come to see that in my own life as an Augustinian, that I need my health and I need these guys to kind of journey. And so something to think about, in your own friendships. Do you need them? Do you see them as a gift? Regardless of where you agree or disagree. Is there something you gain from that? Because if you do, then I think that's purely 100% Augustinian. And so, Father Joe, you wrote an article on friendship, Augustinian friendship. Anything additional out of that you want to share?
I was a little reluctant when I talked to Father Jeremey yesterday. I said, do you think I should bring copies of this article or not? I don't want to stand up here and toot my own horn. But when I was studying to be an Augustinian, it's called Companions on the Journey, Friendship in Augustine, which I think is a really nice summary. He never actually wrote anything in particular specifically on friendship, but it permeates so much of his writing, and it was so much a part of his life. In fact, when he had his conversion experience, he did it with his friend Alypius. And so and then the immediate reaction is he wanted to gather a community of friends together to experience this. They all kind of went through it together. His goal was to keep that together. He went to Hippo to find another member for the community, and all of a sudden he had a pretty big reputation. They're like, here's Augustine. They acclaimed him a priest. He tried. He really just wanted to stay in community where he was, but he accepted it, and he moved to Hippo, but immediately formed a community. And he wrote a rule of life ultimately after he became bishop to pass along how we should live together, called the Rule of St. Augustine, which is at the core of our life together, but it's followed by over 100 religious orders and congregations. And there's a very big emphasis. Of all the rules for religious life, it's the one that emphasizes friendship the most, because it was so important to him, and he knows how important it is to all of us in our journey. The other thing to keep in mind in terms of our friendship is that the Augustinian family extends beyond the friar. So Father Jeremey was alluding to the fact that the call within the call for us to be friars is to be a brother or a priest. We both happen to feel the call to priesthood, but we also have brothers within our order. And then we have religious sisters, and then we have the broader family, the lay involvement in our communities. And the interesting thing, we could be one of the few orders that does this, but when we take our solemn vows, our parents are affiliated to the order. They become Augustinians. And I used to tease my parents and say, wait a minute, I had to go through 7 years of training, and you're just going to walk up and they're going to tell you you're an Augustinian. Sadly, my parents didn't make it. They died before my solemn vows, but then Father Bob Prevost was the head of the order. They called him up and they developed a certificate that they would give to my brother in honor of my parents, because they played such an important part in our role. So our family expands. Our family members become part of us as well. And that's another wonderful connection. Just to touch on the piece, the struggle, we probably, in the Augustinians, someone once used this example that for us, banter is a sign of intimacy for us. You don't banter with people, I think you know from your own experience, unless you feel comfortable with them and you trust them. And if you ever sit at table with us, a group of Augustinians, first of all, we love to share meals, as did Augustine, but we love to banter. And sometimes people are like, whoa, do they really like each other? But it really is a sign of how much we really do like each other and care for each other. So I think that's probably the biggest thing about Augustine's sense of friendship. It's important, it would be almost obvious to state, but it's important to know this, that the difference between, say, friendship and then friendship as he viewed it is that God gives us this gift of friendship. God's at the heart. God's part of these friendships when it's based in faith. That we're not alone. It's not just the two friends, but it's God that helps us. That's a gift that we've been given from God, and it's one of the most incredible gifts I think that God gives us. So I would think that's the main emphasis, the difference between, say, Augustine drew on Cicero a lot for friendship, but he changed the whole perspective because it's a faith-based friendship and that God is part of it, right? So, turn it back to you, Father Jeremy. And I think that one of the things for us is that connection now if we move towards like Pope Leo. And Jeremy mentioned that he went over to the Augustinian house just a couple of days after his election, is what it means to have an Augustinian as the head of the Catholic Church at this point, and what Leo brings to the table for all of us, not just Augustinians, but the Church as a whole.
I don't know.
That notion that friends are a gift from God,
Yeah.
I don't know if they're a gift. It's a little fancy.
After
I would be a gift to you.
4 hours in the car, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, he was a gift. True story.
Can you share it?
Yes.
Oh.
I've never done this before, but I'm on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. I'm driving, and we run out of gas today. And we've never done that before, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, all we're going along is, I think I'm probably going to have to stop for gas. I said, how about something to eat? So we passed this exit and thinking, why didn't we just get off there? I had no idea how low it was. And he's going, okay, it's telling me I've got 13 miles left and this is 18 miles to the next gas station. Well,
but we got through it together.
We did.
With a lot of humor.
That's right.
That's Augustinian friendship right there.
Laughing all the way.
Yes, that's right. And discovering some moment of faith in the midst of it. You know, we start calling on all the saints, and 10 minutes later, somebody comes up with a tow truck and offers us 2 gallons of gas to get us to the next station. But, you know, little things like that, you know, you can't take them for granted. Because for Augustine, God is working in all of that. You know, and so I think an Augustinian lens really invites you to think about that. We have this kind of play that we're doing where, you know, in this world of artificial intelligence, AI, we're proposing as an alternative Augustinian intelligence, AI. And, you know, I think Pope Leo really did an encyclical that was released yesterday on artificial intelligence, but he puts a whole lot of Augustinian intelligence in it. And, you know, I haven't read the whole thing, but if I were to summarize what I know, the starting point for an Augustinian lens is the human person. The human person. And, you know, some of the disclaimers, even AI gets this, because some of the disclaimers will say, when in doubt, consult a human. You know, and this idea that we have to protect ourselves from replacing humans, because that encounter in an Augustinian framework always orients us back to the friend, person to our left and to our right. And so everything I think that Pope Leo will be offering always orients us back to the dignity of the person to our left and our right and around the world. And so, because that's what Augustine did. Augustine was always pointing back to the human person and the gift that human person is. And so an Augustinian framework would also say, okay, this person that may or may not be my friend is given to me in this moment of time for a reason. And seeing that person as a gift. Augustine has this beautiful quote that I love where he says, it's not always possible that everybody be your friend, but it should be your goal that they become your friend. And so as we look to the people in our lives, whether we consider them friends or not, is our heart oriented toward the possibility that they could become our friend? And that, I think, is what the Pope sees AI directly threatening, this notion that I can replace a friend or a person that God has put in my life with something artificial. And so everything in an Augustinian intelligence perspective will orient us back, I think, to the human person. And so, yeah, anything to offer on that?
I would just say one of the attractions of getting to know St. Augustine, I look back on it, when I entered, I knew some things about Augustine and the Augustinians, but over the years, is just how much he understands human nature. So, somebody was sharing the fact, they asked, what is St. Augustine's favorite quote? And instead of saying, our heart is restless till it rests in God, it was, give me chastity, but not yet. So Augustine struggled what it is to be human, and he dealt with pride. He would say the original sin was really pride, dealt with the temptation of lust, all the things that we as human beings encounter, and I think that makes him so relatable, so in the 21st century, that he knows what it is to be human. And as Father Jeremey said, Pope Leo is so much in touch with that. You'll hear so much in what he's already said and what he'll still say, which is touching on the fact of respect for the human being. St. Augustine also is credited with saying no human being is a stranger, that we're all brothers and sisters and created in God's image and likeness, and that we need to treat each other accordingly. So there'll be a lot of emphasis on that as he moves forward in his papacy. And one of the other connections to see, Father Jeremey did a theology on tap back in Philadelphia about a few weeks ago, really, where it was a combined Jesuit Augustinian theology on tap, talking about Pope Francis and Pope Leo, the two orders, and I said, now they're trying to ride on our coattails. Can you imagine? But Pope Francis and Pope Leo had developed a friendship, and when you look back in hindsight and piece it all together, it was almost as if Pope Francis was looking to Leo as the potential future successor to him. He's the one that named him a bishop. He became a bishop in Peru. He's the one that called him from Peru to head up the dicastery for naming bishops around the world, named him a cardinal. So there were all these signs. And we, I think, as Augustinians, bought the line that they would never pick someone from the United States. But so much of his other experience, he was well respected, etc., is what led to his election. And again, a very down-to-earth human guy who gets it. So, and I think just as much as Francis did, but you have a great line that you shared in the car, if you don't mind, about comparing Francis and Leo and what they did and will do.
Yeah, I love it. When Pope Leo was first elected, the media was like, well, what do you think he's going to do? And I said, I don't know. But look to the role of Augustine. And by the way, that theology on top of the Jesuits and the Augustinians was a Jesuit and Augustinian walk into a bar. What happens? And we found out. We had a beautiful discussion because as you think about the friendship that Pope Francis and Pope Leo had, they were in dialogue continually. I think they met every Saturday morning for breakfast, right? And so what you're seeing is Pope Leo continuing to build off of what Pope Francis started. And in my prophetic, self-prophetic world, we'll see if it's true or not, I saw Pope Francis as really kind of getting us to think about some things that maybe we haven't been as thoughtful of in our faith. Getting us to look beyond where we've been, as any pope does. And I think Pope Leo is going to help us figure out how to do that together, across the diversity of our church. And so, in a way, in my own words, Pope Francis stirred the pot a little bit to get us mobilized around some new thinking and some new ideas, and Pope Leo is going to show us now how to bring that together as a united church based on Augustinian intelligence. So we'll open up now in a few minutes for some questions that you may have around friendship. But it is the month of May in which we're really focused on Mary as our model of our disciple. And St. Augustine really looked to her in the same way that we do today, as our mother, as the model disciple for each of us, and powerful intercessor. And we'll close after the Q&A session with a prayer we put on the back. It's called the Prayer to Our Mother Good Counsel. Augustinians generally pray this every morning, but what I love about it is if you think about Mary's life, she was faced with all kinds of uncertainty. She had no idea how all this was going to unfold, at the Annunciation. But she relied solely on God. And she models for us how to do that. And over time, there's been this devotion to her called the Mother of Good Counsel, because she knows how to counsel us through the uncertainties of our own time. And it's interesting that a day or two after Pope Leo was elected, he went to where this image of our Mother of Good Counsel is in Genazzano, Italy, and began his papacy by praying to our Mother of Good Counsel. So with our own challenges, our own difficulties, we'll bring those to her as we close after the Q&A session tonight. So you should have some on your tables. So with that, should we open up for questions?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. No dumb questions, by the way. I haven't heard one yet. Yes.
Did you ever consider any other orders before you joined the Augustine order?
Did I consider any other orders before I joined the Augustinian order? Good question. Yeah, I did. I looked at a lot, but I only visited one. And when I visited the Augustinians, I really felt at home. So not too seriously, but I did look. Every religious order brings something different, a different gift to the church, and I really resonated with the Augustinians. What about you? Did you look at others?
The only other order I looked at were the Jesuits, because I went to St. Joseph's and it was a Jesuit university. But that lasted for about maybe 5 minutes. I love the Jesuits. I respect them. I have friends that are Jesuits, but I didn't feel called to that way of life. They live community differently than the Augustinians. And I felt more called the way that the Augustinians live that. And, you know, in any vocation in life, it's ultimately a leap of faith, be it marriage, religious life, priesthood. But I really believe that God had to be leading me to the Augustinians, as it all turned out. I didn't understand that completely at the time, but when I look back on the way it unfolded, I didn't really, this is the scary part, I didn't have a plan B. When I sold that townhouse and gave my car to my parents, and you know, people would come in my house and they'd say, "Are you keeping that painting?" I said, "Not really." They'd take it off the wall and leave with it. So, you know, I didn't really have a plan if that didn't all work out, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, only the Jesuits, other than the Augustinians. Anybody else? Questions?
I had a question. So I, much like you, came from a very Protestant background. I'm the only Catholic in my family now. It was very like Reformed background, and so the Reformed theology within Protestantism, they like to like claim Saint Augustine as like a hero for them, and somehow he like taught the real faith, and Rome distorted all of this, and like what Augustine taught isn't actually what the Catholic Church teaches. I'm like, you realize there's like a school of thought. There's literally a religious community named after St. Augustine within there. So I wasn't sure, in your experience of being with the Augustinians, did they ever touch on that at all? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, great question. So I think your question centers around the influence that Augustine has had on, you know, Protestant faiths, as well as, you know, how we understand them today. It's funny because I grew up in a Lutheran church, and Martin Luther was an Augustinian before he left the Catholic Church. So I always find, like, God has a sense of humor, right? He was priming me. I think one of the things that fascinates people about St. Augustine is he's a mind on the move. You really can't master him. Because he's, through the gift of community, continually, even as a bishop, as a priest, and in all his writings, he's continually, his thought, his understanding evolves. And so when you read something that Augustine taught, you got to look at when he wrote it and what was going on at what point of his journey. And even on his deathbed, he's trying to finish retractions to clarify some of the things that he had previously taught. And so I think that's a hard question to answer with any certainty. But the fact that he was so prolific in his writings and his thinking and covered so many different topics, his thought has relevance, I think, to all Christian faiths, would be my interpretation.
The other thing, just as a point of fact, is the last council of the Church, Vatican Council II, he's the most quoted theologian in those documents. So he's had an influence that extends throughout the history of the Church, certainly in the Catholic Church, but again, Martin Luther, as Father Jeremey said, being an Augustinian, that a lot of people have claimed Augustine because he said so much and wrote so much that there's so much to draw on. So you can take it and use it in all different kinds of ways. And some things are really misunderstood. So, his concept about original sin, and the just war theory, there's so many things that people can take. It's kind of like scripture, where you can take it, pick it, and use what you want to support whatever it is that you are believe or want to say. So, yeah. Any other questions?
If you were to advise someone starting to read St. Augustine, where should they start?
There's a book that we have called Day by Day with St. Augustine that was written by an Augustinian friar, and for each day there is a snippet from his writings and then a reflection written by this friar that's very relatable. It's excellent. By Don Burt is his name, Father Don Burt, Day by Day, St. Augustine. That's a great way to sort of get a sense of Augustine if you're not familiar. To take on, I think there's a gentleman here, Reese, who said he started with reading The City of God. Now that's taken on a lot. It's an excellent work, but not everybody can master City of God right away. I had a classmate in my novitiate year from England when he was asked by our director, well, what introduced you to Augustine? He said, I read De Trinitate on the Trinity. We're like, what? I mean, that's another heavy one where basically I was saying this coming weekend is the Trinity Sunday, and Augustine says it's beyond the human mind to really comprehend and understand the Trinity, and then he spends over 400 pages explaining the Trinity. So some of it can be a bit daunting initially. Of course, the one work that people relate to probably the most would be Confessions, considered to be the first real spiritual autobiography. It can be a little tough, actually, the first time you read it, but there's so much in there. If you take it for what it is, it's basically praise to God and thanking God that he was able to find God and find himself in his life. And a lot of people relate to what I was saying earlier, that he reveals so much. In fact, there were some people in the church at the time felt it was scandalous because he was so open about his life and things that he had done, and admitted that he still dealt with those temptations even as a bishop in the church. So I would say the Day by Day with St. Augustine, Confessions would probably be the other one to delve into, or anything else that might attract you, like City of God or De Trinitate. Do you have any others?
I would just say, if you're reading the Confessions and it's not for a class, there's no shame in using Spark Notes or even AI to get a summary, because it's an ancient text, but it's so rich that even maybe just reading a summary online of the Confessions of the major parts of the story can be a wonderful place to start. Tons of great YouTube videos out there. That could be a great entry into that. So good. I think we had another hand up back here. Yes?
You shared this very beautiful sentiment that Pope Francis sort of set the stage for the unity of the church and the Pope Leo great fulfillment. I'm curious if you could elucidate that a little further. In what ways Pope Francis sort of created an atmosphere for the unity of the church?
Yeah, so the question back to the relationship between Francis and Leo, and again, this is fairly speculative, but I think one of the beautiful things, if you read the teachings of the church that the popes put out, the encyclicals, they all build on their predecessors. They all reference their predecessors. There's a story being written over the course of time. So, for example, Laudato Si was not just something Pope Francis came up with. That had been built by 3 of his successors. And so I think what you're going to see is Pope Francis brought his Jesuit spirituality, mission-oriented, into his papacy. And now what you're going to see is Pope Leo bringing his Augustinian spirituality into it. And so I think, and I think you see this in his first 2 church teachings, De Lexite and now his new encyclical, you see him calling humanity very directly back together in some ways. And so I think that's going to be the gift that Pope Leo brings at this chapter in our history. I don't know if you have other thoughts on that.
Right. I think also they just have different personalities, as we all do, right? So Francis was very much like off the cuff and just say it. Whereas Leo is very measured and thoughtful before he says something. That's a really big difference between the two of them. And you can see that playing out in the way that Leo interacts with others, with the news media, etc. And I think in that more measured style, it's a reflection of his personality, but it's also a reflection of how he sort of looks at things, that he understands that in order to bring people together and not divide, that we need to emphasize what we have in common and build on that and create that unity and that togetherness that we should all adhere to as Christians and as Catholics. Right? Interesting little trivia point. I used this a couple of weeks ago at our volunteer appreciation dinner in our parish. It was one of the categories was church and Pope Leo. But the question to think about, in the Universal Catholic Church, there are rites or churches. So for example, the Latin rite, the Roman Catholic Church is one. How many are there altogether in the Universal Catholic Church? This blew people's minds, actually. Anybody want to take a guess?
24.
Oh, exactly. Wow. Wish you were there. You would have won the trivia contest. Yeah, 24. 23 Eastern Catholic churches, all that are part of the Universal Catholic Church. And I think a lot of people in the Roman Latin rite don't always understand that. But I think I heard before our talk tonight that there was a representation here of people from those rites. It's just a sign of the fact that the Catholic Church, as the word Catholic means, is universal, and that it's a lot more than what we might think that it is. And it's quite a responsibility. If you've seen the Pope meeting with leaders from those other rites, it's really important to him as well in building this unity.
So in section 34 of the encyclical, Pope Leo says about religious freedom, the tolerance of religious freedom. And does he mean Christians or like all religions? All religions.
Yes.
So that doesn't, okay. I would say that doesn't build on the church where they say like you're in schism if you're out of the church, and then all other religions, I mean, for Catholic, the Muslims aren't. That's different, yeah.
Right.
So
He would probably go back to the beginning of Scripture where we're told all people are made in the image and likeness of God. And that's the one thing that we share in common. That's why he would say no human being is a stranger, even if we don't share the same faith per se. That doesn't mean that we don't love our faith and promote our faith, etc. But we also have to be respectful of all people, whatever their background, and help lead them to God however we can best do that. And I think that would be his stance.
One more question? Yes.
So did St. Augustine directly found the Augustinian order, or did he only inspire you?
Great question. If you're ever on Jeopardy, you're going to be glad you asked that question. No, he did not found the order. There was really no such thing as that. What he did was, after his conversion, he formed a community of like-minded brothers. And as I sometimes joke with college students, Augustine really had no intent to be a priest or a bishop. He just wanted to live in a frat house and talk about God all day. And so he formed this community. And then, of course, he's made a priest and then a bishop, and then he had to move. And he wrote the role of Augustine for this community to continue the good life that they had begun together, as he now moves into the bishop's residence to begin a new community. And after his death and beyond, other people started to form communities using that rule. And so it spread throughout Europe and beyond. And in 1244, Pope Innocent, right? Get the two mixed up, actually said, okay, we're going to pull these communities together and form an order. And so it was in 1244 that the Order of Augustine was actually founded by the church. In 1256 is really the year we celebrate. That's really where the deal was kind of finalized. So he's certainly the inspiration, he's the spiritual founder, but not the founder of the, juridical order of St. Augustine, per se. It's a great question. Good history there. So, as we close, does everybody have one of these Third Our Mother Good Counsel cards? Do we have enough out there for everybody? spirit of St. Augustine, what I want to invite us to do tonight is to invoke our Mother Good Counsel in our relationships. So maybe call to mind a relationship that's difficult for you. One that you're not sure how to navigate. Maybe one that's just mysterious to you. But think of a relationship that you have, a friend, family member, coworker, and just take a moment and call that to mind, and then we'll ask the Blessed Mother to intercede for us in the spirit of Augustine through that, for that relationship. And on the back, not the side with Pope Leo's picture, but on the back you'll see the prayers for our Mother of Good Counsel. So, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And together, we turn to you, our Mother of Good Counsel, as we seek to imitate your faith-filled life. May we be led by the same wisdom which God sent forth from heaven to guide you along unfamiliar paths and through challenging decisions. Keep us united in mind and heart as we go forward in joyful hope toward the grace-filled freedom that St. Augustine recommends. O Virgin Mother of Good Counsel, hear our prayer as we look to you for guidance. Pray for us to our loving and merciful Father, to your Son, our Lord Jesus the Christ, and to the Holy Spirit, giver of all wisdom, one God, forever and ever. Amen. And we have extra ones of these if you'd like to take some and share it with somebody. And you got to get a Pope Leo sticker. And does anybody know what in illo uno means? Latin scholars. In illo uno means in the one we are one. That's Pope Leo's Episcopal motto. So a sign of his true charism. So we have all kinds of good stuff over there. Get a Pope Leo sticker. Get your prayer to our Mother Good Counsel. And I think we'll stick around afterwards if you have other questions you want to talk. So thank you for having us.
All right, thank you, fathers, and thank you guys all for coming. Looking ahead to the future, we wanted to make an announcement. Our Altoona counterparts are having this Friday at 6:30 p.m. at the Catholic War Vets in Altoona. Young adult cookout and social. They're going to have food and some games and stuff like that. We're going to be posting that in our group me. So if you're not in the group me, there's a QR code over here on this table, as well as on the table over there with some information and some stuff from the friars. So we hope to see you there. Here in Johnstown, moving ahead, our next event is going to be on Friday, June 12th. We're going to have a rosary and bonfire again at Greenhouse Park, just like we did last year. And then for our Theology on Tap next month, we'll be meeting here again on June 24th. And in honor of the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and being close to the Sacred Heart of Jesus feast day, for the 4th year in a row, we're going to have one of the Sacred Heart sisters come. We're going to have, some of you may know, Sister Jacinta. I believe right now she is in Minnesota. She's going to be coming in to speak to us here on humility, which is a topic I believe she's given to some of the ladies here at retreats whenever they're younger. So Sister Jacinta used to be the Provincial Superior for the United States of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the Sister Servants of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. She'll be here next month. So we hope to see you guys this Friday, as well as June 12th for the Rosary and Bonfire, and June 24th for another Sacred Heart sister, who are always a fun time to have. So thank you guys all for coming. Can't do this without you. We appreciate everybody being here and for being patient with the food and everything, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, fathers. Thank you.
And it looks real if you get a picture, so you can say, oh, it does look very real. So,
Is it life size?